Welcome, everybody. Today's lesson is going to be how do you get from this to this, right? How, how do you, this is too thick to see through. What do you do? How do you do it? There's several ways that are best practices in the industry, and I'll go through those and explain them to you on how it works. So let's get started right away. First, there are two different methods. There's a direct tracing. So if you have a very loosely woven linen, you can put the linen right over your pattern and trace through it. That's one way. The other way is to use something like this. I call this dotless red dot. And it's a way of transferring what's on the pattern to your backing using the transfer fabric. So I will show you how to get that set up for both methods and then how to follow through with the transfer fabric. Here's the pattern. I had originally planned on doing a full stair riser, but I couldn't get it to fit in the camera right. So this is only 6 by 15. Long enough that it's important to get this on the straight of grain, and I'll show you how that works. The first thing we need to do is to simply lay the transfer fabric. And if you notice, when I put it down, you almost don't even know that I still have it there, right? This was the original red dot that we were using years ago. It's slightly thicker, has the red dots, which quite frankly were due to the manufacturing process, were not always done really well. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is simply mark the corners because I'm never going to draw a straight line through the red dot. And I like to use a marker that's not my Sharpie. First off, it makes my Sharpies last a little bit longer. And when you use a Sharpie to transfer a pattern, you need to know that you need to use pretty new Sharpies. If you're using a Sharpie that you've had around for a while, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter to the point where it is so dry that not enough of the ink will seep through. So it is important to have a nice fresh Sharpie. Now, I also like to use a colored marker here so that later on, when I am transferring this to the fabric, I'll know where I've been and what I've done. Okay, so now I'm all transferred, and one way you can double check it is you can kind of lift it and look and see if you've got all the lines, but this pattern is really pretty simple. Now, what if we didn't use this type of fabric? What other fabrics are out there and available? Well, a lot of people will use wetting tulle, but that tends to rack. Now, this will not rack. This stays on one plane the whole time. So you don't have to worry about your fabric racking and the tulle racking and trying to get both to line up. So that's one reason I like this. Other people will use window screens. I don't like window screens because it's more holes than fabric, where this is more fabric than holes. When I draw a line, I see 100% of the line. I don't just see little dots on threads that I have to connect. So I can transfer more detailed patterns using this method. I know some people have tried to use iron-on pens that they use in quilting, and it's impossible to get that straight. So don't even bother with that. Hand tracing is always going to be your best method. Now, there is a trend of people using the Crackstop, which I'm real familiar with because every home we've owned has had plaster walls, and that's what you use to repair plaster walls because the cracking can extend. You have to have a scaffold there to hold it together. The problem is it's not pH neutral. Or at least it doesn't say so on the package. So when you're putting that on your fabric and then ripping it off, yeah, it's great that it stays put and it doesn't move. But at what price? You're putting a thin layer of something that is going to speed up or could speed up the deterioration of your backing. I don't know for sure. Am I willing to take that chance? No. Not when I have an alternative that, in my opinion, works pretty much just as well. So let's talk about what happens when you're getting the backing ready. This is a 1 yard piece of 75-inch rug warp. It's actually cut in half, and I have a footstool pattern on this side, but I'm going to use the back for this demo. So I've got a piece that's roughly 36 by 36, and my pattern, where'd that paper pattern go? My pattern, when I set it on here, I have edges that are roughly 10-ish, about 10 inches on each side. Okay, I got 10 inches on this side, and I have 10 inches on the other side over there at a camera angle. So what I would tend to do is I would tend to put 10 inches on this one, only because that then gives me the possibility of turning this pattern into anything I want. And then I'm going to go 10 inches out, and it looks like there's not going to be much there, so I'm probably not going to cut it off. I'm just going to leave the upper edge of that bigger and ignore it until I'm ready to cut it off. But this gives me the possibility of expanding this pattern. Maybe I want to put a little border on it. Ooh, I can see it now. Maybe a border like my room size rug. This could be a little companion to my room size rug. And I could end up making this into something quite a bit larger than it is right now. But I could only do that if I have enough backing. So in this particular case, because that sounds really exciting, and I might actually end up hooking this. I wasn't planning on hooking it. I think I'm going to turn it this way. If I get about 10 there, about 10 there. It's about the same both ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center, which it looks like I've already found due to the process of creating the footstool. So I'm going to get my little tracing. And one thing I did put it on the pattern to make it easy. And this is where it can get a little bit dicey. If you've got a pattern that goes one way, and it's important that you don't accidentally trace it this way, okay? If it's got lettering on it, you're probably going to get it right. But what I typically do is I just write my name on the bottom. That way I know that when I am transferring this, if I see my name backwards, I know that I've got the pattern backwards. It's something that takes, a microsecond, and it really keeps you on track. I'm going to mark the center because I had found it on the paper pattern. And I'm going to line up the center with this center. And that's about all I'm going to fuss with. From here, I need a pencil. And I am simply going to, where's my good markers? I am simply going to put dots in the 4 areas. And I don't normally do all 4. I normally do 2. But I want to show you what's going to happen. I know this is not going to be perfect. I know it's going to end up crooked. But I'll tell you why it's going to be okay. So I'm simply going to draw in the ditch. See how that didn't line up? But that's okay. And then from here to here. That really didn't line up. So there is our actual square. What I basically relied on was these two dots, and I ignored where these two ended up. But what happens is when you have it marked in the center, you can have it this way or you could have it this way. Get it roughly close. It does not have to be perfect. Sure, I'm probably off of center by a couple of threads, but in the big scheme of things, does that matter? Absolutely not. So now it's time to transfer the pattern. It doesn't feel good to stick your finger in a thing of pins. I'm going to line up two dots, and I usually grab the longest side, and I am going to pin them in place. Okay, and then just straighten out the fabric. Oh, of course, it comes out perfect. Let me mess this up a little bit so it doesn't come out perfect. This is how it will probably come out on your rug. So on my red dot, or my dotless, I have a dot here and a dot here. So what happens is the backing is leaning one way or the other too far. So I'm just going to tug in the direction I think it needs to go, and then pat it down again and see how it lines up. And this time it just lined up perfectly. So now I'm going to lock it down. I don't usually use a whole lot of pins. This would normally be it. But if you wanted more pins, you would just put them wherever you're not going to be drawing. Okay. Then with a marker, and it is important to use a new marker and to use the right marker. This is a Sharpie Industrial. They are permanent up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. They're suitable for fabric. If you read a regular Sharpie, it will say that it is permanent at room temperature and that it is not suitable for fabric. So don't use a regular Sharpie. Make sure you use an industrial. And Diana Kistner wanted to know, what pen are you using for the tracing? This was simply a Tombow pen, and I used the little pointy ends. You can use whatever marker you want. I just have a whole set of these. I got 1 year from my birthday, so I am using them rather than letting them just sit and linger inside the beautiful little container that they came in. And then you want to trace, and you want to trace slowly. So this is where you put some music on, or you watch, a TV show, or listen to it because your eyes are busy elsewhere. And you don't rush. You take your time, and you go over every shape with somewhat of some firm pressure. I mean, you're not pressing super hard on this. But now see how easy it is to tell when I don't have something traced, and I can go back and trace that really easily. You will begin to get marker on the side of your hand, but that I just scrub that off with one of those, some soap and one of those green scrubbies, and it takes it right off. But I do wait until I am all the way done. So these are just some old-fashioned type roses, very primitive style that I've been hooking lately. Something that I can use up a bunch of scraps on. Okay. Then once you're done, you want to scan it and make sure that you've gotten all your lines. I take out the pins, including the interiors. And then I go back and I go over the black lines. Luckily, when they're pencil, If something happened during the process when we were lining up the dotless red dot tracing and it did not line up, I would be able to come in and make another line, either a thread or two away, and then do my marker on the permanent line. That's why I don't mess with it until I have it completely worked out. Now, the most common reason it will not match up is because when it was drawn on the paper pattern, it wasn't square there either. Okay, so that's when you'll have to make adjustments. And to check if something is square, you simply measure one diagonal and then measure the other diagonal and see if it's square in your original. Because if it's not square in your original, guess what? It's not going to be square on your fabric. I tend to assume it's square, and then if it's not, then I'll go back and have to adjust it. Now there's a few other steps that you would do to a pattern, and I'm going to save that for members of the rug cooking journey inside the course. I do when I am transferring a pattern, if I have a straight line, I never, ever, ever draw a straight line through the backing. I will do what I did for the outline. I'll put a dot, I'll lift it up, I'll draw a line with the pencil, and then where it ends, I'll put another dot, and then I'll come back and connect the two. So if I have like windows in a house and those need to be nice and square, I will do every window that way. Because when you draw a straight line through a tracing fabric, it's not going to line up with the straight of grain. And quite frankly, having a really, really square pattern is going to make your rug cooking life so much easier. If you want to see more videos like this, go here and watch these. That's it, everybody. See you later.